And we're live.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining this live discussion on the future of no code. For those of you who perhaps do not know, Codemap is the first and the biggest freelance platform specifically for no code, where you can find no code work or hire no code professionals. And we've created an in-depth report of the state of the no code market for 2021, which you can download on our LinkedIn page. And we're going to discuss the key findings and some of the future trends with our guests. So let's move on to our participants. Uh, we have Jesse with us. Jesse is the co founder of Triggre, a no code platform for complex custom business applications. He started his first software company at 19 and has since started two other successful SaaS companies and is here today to talk with us about the future of no code. Niall is the managing director of no code tech, and I think he doesn't need any more introduction. No code tech is one of the largest learning communities there is on no code. And my name is Goran, and I'm the co founder and chief marketing officer of Codemap. So, shall we go on with it?
Yeah, let's get into this.
Okay, the first thing we're going to discuss are the drivers for the adoption of no code. So Gartner states that main drivers for no code adoption are democratization, hyperautomation, and composable businesses. Also, it says that no code adoption is intricately linked to SaaS, and OutSystems state that main reason businesses use no code is to accelerate digital transformation and increase responsiveness to the business environment. So, Jesse, what is your view on those drivers and specifically on composable businesses, let's say?
I think that the democratization is definitely a thing that's been going on for longer. You can see that if you look at sort of the history of coding, right? There's always been a drive to have more people eligible to write software, and this also drives the amount of software that we want, and you see the hyper automation, sort of those two work together in that sense. So that's been a long ongoing trend. That's really accelerated now with before with low code and now with no code, actually really trying to get a different profile of people into building applications. Composable business is a really interesting concept that we used to call it here strategic agility. It's basically you see that companies, I guess it's been sort of accelerated, right, by the COVID situation, that businesses have really seen now that, you know what, digitalization and being able to quickly adapt to different circumstances is now more mainstream than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. So I definitely see these three things coming together and providing huge opportunities for people that are into now, like the early adopters. Basically, the people that are now looking at this are probably the early adopters of this, of building applications for themselves if you have a company, but also for your customers. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree at that one. And also I think that the no-code adoption is definitely linked to SaaS adoption because more and more companies these days, they use a variety of digital tools. And SaaS tools in themselves, they have some features you can tweak basically without using the code. And then you can, furthermore, you can link them, integrate them together into, connect them together. So I think no-code adoption is definitely linked to SaaS adoption. Would you agree
Yeah.
on that?
Yeah, for sure. It's nowadays like you see this transformation where even larger companies and even banks nowadays actually they're no longer really afraid to have a SaaS business like a cloud hosted solution, as long as it's a little bit, let's say one of the well-known places where it's hosted, then they're usually pretty okay with it. The only thing that sometimes gets in the way is legal issues, specifically for banks. But you see that the adoption of SaaS for really like business critical things has really come to a maturity in the recent years. So that is definitely no longer a barrier in the way it used to be.
Yeah, I agree definitely on that. And as you said it correctly, COVID has definitely been sort of a catalyst for these main drivers, because I believe it has proven the no code hypothesis, and it has definitely reduced barriers to entry for a lot of businesses. I mean, in 2022, Gartner expects high-profile tech product launches starting from non-tech companies, and it predicts that by 2023, over 30 billion in revenue will be generated by products and services that didn't exist before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And the year after, around one third of the tech providers will then be directly competing with those non-tech providers that have entered the space thanks to no code and thanks to COVID.
Yeah.
Is that something you also see in with Triggre? Do you see an increase in demand these days and general user numbers?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think there's two cases that sort of come to mind that sort of as an illustration that's really interesting. So one is in education. We recently had someone ask in that because they weren't really like the educational world in terms of like schools and everything. They weren't very much into digitalization before the COVID pandemic that much. It was always very slow. They would like to do things, but like there was no pressure to really digitalize processes and streamline them. And we noticed that right now that has completely, basically turned upside down because with all the homeschooling and having to find ways how to still conduct exams while being online, basically, that has really taken a big leap. So that's the one, and like those companies that just never thought about it and then do it. And then the other thing that we see is that you have companies who have, like you said, multiple tools, whether that's SaaS or on premise, and they don't want to get their own like huge IT department to develop things, but they do need to streamline processes, for example, or build tools like customer portals that expose that data from different systems. They now like typing over things from one sheet to another, and then from this system into that, sometimes even like 3 times, because they just use different systems that are best for their specific thing. And then they are looking for solutions to tie that together, either with one system to sort of streamline the process, or just by things that are more along like the lines of RPA, like robotic process automation, to get the data instead of humans doing that, just to get it into the hands of machines that can do it more efficiently. So you see a lot of those things, and those are definitely drivers for these things. And I do believe that with sort of the rise of the wider no-code platforms, you get non-tech providers coming up with really cool solutions that will basically directly compete, indeed, with these tech providers that have been able to build that with code. But that might change quickly, actually, in the coming years.
Yeah, that's definitely something we also see on our marketplace, because I mean the demand for marketplaces and for e-commerce businesses has absolutely skyrocketed, and those are basically non essentially tech businesses which are trying to develop their own platforms, and they're doing it rather successfully, I would say. And one other big confirmation, I think, of the accelerated use during the COVID is also, as we found in our report, I believe that the VC funding has more than doubled specifically for no-code tools in 2021. I mean, it has like a steady growth during the past couple of years, and then 2021 has absolutely skyrocketed. I think that everyone sees this as the solution. at least.
Yeah. One investor that we've been talking to said, like, look, low code was like this wave that came along, and no code is like a tsunami that's just gonna really change everything. And I think one of the biggest real differences is that with low code, if you look at the profile of the user, that the person that uses it, you still really have to have some technical knowledge. Whereas if you look at like some of the already some very niche no code platforms, like let's say Shopify, right? You don't need any technical knowledge. You can fit a little bit here and there, and maybe with some googling, some CSS, you can get a long way. But it is by no means a technical knowledge that you sort of need to have to actually get a good shop running. And that is a huge difference indeed from what you're able to do with the low-code tools in terms of the person that's using the tool itself. So that is going to be a big differentiator over those years, where actually, like, yeah, we call them business people, but basically people that don't necessarily have a formal education in software engineering, like for example I do, can actually build software, which is a huge game changer.
Yeah, that's definitely super interesting to think about how exactly the future skill set, let's say, of the future developer, no code developer, will look like. Because yeah, let's move on to this slide. No code is already changing the workplace. I mean, it has definitely started already. As we said, the IT departments are evolving. There are more and more tools used and integrated together, and this is a number by Gartner. So I didn't expect this one. So the 30% of custom apps are already being built by employees with no technical knowledge, as you said. I didn't expect this number to be that high. And then that by 2024, 80% of apps is going to be built by citizen developers or business technologists. So I think I mean, those are insane numbers. And McKinsey confirms the same. They state that no code is ideal for addressing the major skill gaps that are present now, which is one of them is definitely the developer shortage, data analyst shortage, whatnot. And now is, of course, the perfect time to reskill, upskill. So
Yeah, definitely. I guess that Nile sees a lot of uptick in like the amount of people that that want to learn about no code, or like in general, just like what sort of questions do you get in that sense?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty huge, I think with the whole kind of like the 30% stat you've got there, it doesn't surprise me too much, because I think when we use the term citizen developer, it's quite positive. We want people to be building stuff, and more people being able to do that. But we already have a term for that today that's a lot more negative, which is shadow IT.
yeah, exactly.
So people are already building apps with stuff like Excel and Microsoft Access and that kind of thing. And so, a lot of the people who come to us today, they're trying to build apps, and they never use the word software. They always want to build apps, and it could be mobile apps or web apps, or marketplace apps. People put the word app behind that as well. But where we're starting to see a little bit of kind of growth is people who maybe already have skills in Excel, or maybe something else like Figma, like a design tool. They already have some sort of skill set to rely on, and now they almost want to enhance that and be able to be more productive with it. So maybe if you can already do Excel skills, well, maybe you can now use something like Triggre or like Betty Blocks or like Stacker, where it's maybe not as easy to use as some of the more kind of consumer facing tools. But you can just do so much more if you get those skills. And I think in the enterprise and in large companies, some of the first I was going to say people to adopt it, not even just citizen developers, but some of the first people to really start adopting no code, I think, will be the people who are already relied on today. That one person in the team who you kind of say, oh yeah, Steve has got really good Excel skills, he can probably whip something up. I think those are going to be the first people who start to adopt no code in the enterprise.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting that you mentioned shadow IT. This is something that, in terms of the marketing, this is really interesting. I think in terms of also looking at the future of specifically of no code. So shadow IT was one of those terms that the IT departments actually introduced as a counter move to low code. So you get these low code platforms, right? And they want to sell their platform to more like enterprise companies, and the IT departments, they get scared about that because they're like, okay, this is going to take away our work or our power. And they come up with these things like shadow IT, meaning like business people building software. We can't have that. That's going to be chaos, right? So that's a thing that now has gotten a little bit more to the background, I think, where people actually see that, it's not that bad to actually have people do what for developers is the boring work, so to say. So that's the thing. What you now see, though, and this I find very interesting, is you see that the low-code platforms now actually keep no-code and low-code sort of in one category, right? Whereas to me, I think that they are definitely different categories. Low-code really does still cater to those developers being able to develop faster. And a lot of that goes without coding, but those platforms do still provide you a lot of ways to code. And it in general means that you have still like technical people working with them, which is good because they're a lot more productive. Whereas no code is much more about the, like we said here, right? The citizen developer, the business technologists, the people, as Niall said, that use Excel already and are like Excel wizards. They are very quick usually to adopt this. And you see now that there's a struggle going on with those people that basically you see in the Gartner quadrants to keep those markets together. So it's really hard to find differentiated numbers on no code and low code separate from each other. If you look, however, at the search terms, so the growth, I think the yearly accumulated growth rate, so the CAGR for low code and no code is like something like 31%, I think, which is incredible amounts. And then if you look at how many searches there were and like tweets on no code versus low code, you see that actually within that, no code actually has a 7 times larger attention rate than low code. So that tsunami that we were talking about earlier, you can see them that in those kinds of numbers. If you dig deeper, you can see it, but it's hard to find general market data that splits them. Don't be fooled by things being sort of still packed together. That will change in the upcoming years as well.
Yeah, and I
think
that
it's
sorry, now I'll continue.
Sorry, Gordon, on you go.
No.
Yeah, I was going to say it's good to hear someone else say that, because I think it is, to me, one of the single biggest problems facing, adoption of no code and low code, in kind of larger companies at the minute. And it may seem as simple as a name, but actually, if you're no code, you're going to be used by an entirely different department. If you're low code, that's fine. IT can run with you, but they're not really going to be using much no code. Your no code is going to fall to operations or HR or legal or these kind of departments who are typically underserved by IT. And so I think it's something that we all have to do as people in the no code or no code / low code community, to sort of split them out and make a bigger deal about that. And I think the thing that's really important there is, if you've ever been involved in the selection process, or in fact, if you've ever worked at a large company and wondered why the software you use is generally terrible, it's because what happens is you tend to take a list of all the features of 2 comparable pieces of software, you compare them, and the one that's got the most features and the cheapest price is the one that gets picked. You never ever pick the one with the best interface. And for most categories of software, although that can be a bit of a pain, it generally works, which is why people do it. But with no code, it's different, because the difference in an interface, wouldn't really be picked up on a spreadsheet comparison like that, but actually makes a massive difference. You consider, for example, how long it takes someone to learn Card or even a DAL or Glide versus how long it takes to learn Bubble. Bubble's really, really hard to use, really powerful, But I reckon I can. Well, I was going to say I do train people to learn Glide and Adalo in about 2 weeks. Whereas Bubble, it's very rare to see anyone be productive in that in less than 4 or 6. And if you're an IT team making a decision of what tool to use, that's an exponential difference. 2 versus 6 weeks or something. And that's the kind of nuance that is quite well understood in the consumer space, but totally lost, I think, in the enterprise space. And I think we'll see, hopefully, more people start to get that over 2022.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, what you say is really true, and one of the things that I think, if we look at the future, like how companies will evolve in using these tools, back in what was it, like the 90s, early 2000s, right? You go work at this company, and you get a laptop, and it's all sealed up. You can log in. That's all you can do. You have your Lotus Notes on there with your email. And that's all you can use, right? And along comes Apple with the iPhone, and they say, like, look, you can really read email easily on your iPhone. It's more of a consumer product, right? So people are now saying, like, hey, I have like, as a consumer, I have this iPhone. It's nice that you have me that BlackBerry and everything, but can't I read my email on the iPhone? Because it just works nicer. And this has really changed how IT departments have had to cope with providing, I would say, services to their employees, right? And we've all seen that, because nowadays, you get your phone and they say, like, here's our email stuff. You can figure it on your phone, and whether that's an Android or iPhone or whatever phone you use, your home computer, you can read your email with whichever reader you like. So they're now providing services. So you see that that span of control has shrunk a little bit, and it takes a while, because obviously they still have to make sure that it's safe and it's easy to use for everyone. But you'll see the same thing happen actually with processes and data in companies, I think, at least. So what you'll see is that the core of the business, the core will really exist out of, like, let's say the core of data, customer data, order data, the things that you just have to really make sure that those things live in a central system, and around that central system there will be APIs that you can use. So an order API, customer API, and everything. And then you'll get, like Niall says, you'll get these business departments that actually use that data, use that API, because these things are easy nowadays. Use that API to build a tool that actually leverages the processes to their, let's say, their stakeholders. It can be customers, it can be suppliers. It doesn't matter much. I have a ton of examples just from our business, so I'm sure that you recognize these. But that sort of change in the bigger companies, that is coming, and that will definitely further fuel that difference also between low code and no code, because I think that no code will be used indeed in those, let's say, the outer areas, whereas low code is more for keeping that main processes, the main data intact, clean, and good. And then that is I see how these companies will evolve and allow their workers to be a lot more productive, and they can adapt much faster that way to changing situations in the market.
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting subject, and it definitely needs to be dug deeper. So yeah, how exactly would businesses then benefit from no code? I mean, they would save time and money by accelerating their digital transformation, increasing responsiveness to the business environment. They would reduce dependency on expensive developers, and they're basically enabling non-technical employees to improve internal processes. Those are just like higher level categories, but exactly like how that would work, that's super interesting. I think you have probably some ideas about that, Jesse, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, bad joke incoming, by the way. This is prepared, so brace yourselves here. Like, I think really for, like, the end customer, right? So the user of the no code is a no-brainer. That's a really bad sort of joke, but it is true. So no code is a no-brainer for these people. We have customers that say, like, look, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more flexible. I'm not going to look for anything else if I need to build something custom that sort of links some systems together with a process. Okay, I get that. But I think that, I think we because we talked about that earlier, like that I think that bridge has now been scaled, and has just been accelerated a lot by the pandemic, which is a positive by-effect of a tough situation. But what I find is I think interesting, and where we're still at a crossroads is with the partner ecosystems, right? So the people that that learn no code with no code tech, and the people that actually implement things for customers through Codemap. Like, what you have to consider is with no code becoming very widespread, you'll sort of get a gig economy, and that's something that I don't necessarily think is a good thing. If you look at Fiverr, for example, you can get a very cheap little design and things because people live in countries where those prices are just lower, and there will be a market for these things. So as you can, maybe many of you have read the book From Zero to One by Peter Thiel, but he has one thing in there, and that's like any competitive market is like a zero-sum game, right? So if something, if all else is equal, then what you're going to choose is the one that has the lowest price. And ultimately, it comes down to, the skill sets, bar you having some really specific knowledge of, let's say, manufacturing processes or something else. It is going to be a competitive market. So that's something that I see coming, which I'm also a little bit worried about. You can see from for example, in the Codemap market review that the prices are fine per hour that you get. I think that that's not going to stay that way, because us as a no-code platform builder, we want to make it simpler and simpler to use, and at the same time more powerful, right? Because we want more types of users to be able to build more types of applications. That means that more and more and more people will actually jump on the bandwagon. Now, that's a good thing on one hand, but on the other hand, it's also a problem. So I want to be really transparent about that. And what I think there is really interesting is that you can also look at companies, and this is because we've identified that as Triggre. So I'm speaking for myself now here, but we really want our partners, so the people that actually build applications for other people, for their customers, to also benefit from that. And what we've done, for example, is we introduced a model where our customers, our end customers, they pay based on how much they use, right? So let's say that you have a customer portal and you're happy about it. If you use it more, you pay more for the customer portal. The only reason that you would pay more is because you're happy about it, right? It gives you some sort of business benefit. So what we've done is we've said, look, the partners get a commission, recurring commission, perpetual, on their customers' subscriptions. So if our partners sell a subscription and that increases in use, that means that they get more commission. And this is interesting because these partners can teach their customers to make adaptations to their systems, make changes to their systems. They can even introduce whole new applications if they want. And then the partner still benefits from an increase in their commission. So this opens up a whole new business model for partners, which is based on recurring revenue, which is something that if you only sell your time and material is not accessible. So if you look to the future, I think that having that healthy situation where the benefit of the tech platform, the no-code platform, and the benefit of the partner and the benefit of the end customer are completely in line, I think that is something that you should be very aware of, that this is something that you want to really dive into for any platform that you choose to work with. There are examples, I'm not going to name and shame, there are examples of companies that have both a tech platform, like a low-code or a no-code, but they also have a consultancy business. And ultimately, what that means is that when it comes down to it, that the consultancy business will try to take away cases, like interesting cases, profitable cases, from partners. And that is actually actively happening in the market, which is something just to be aware of. So right now, you're still early in the market. it's a really good time to build that recurring revenue stream and build that sort of resilience a little bit for prices lowering and get that new business model in as a partner. Yeah.
I think that's definitely great. That's definitely super healthy for the whole ecosystem, right? Because otherwise, as you said, you would be basically pushing out the partners, the providers, as we've seen on many examples like Uber and whatnot. Like the prices are just dropping, and the end user is the one that gets all the benefits. Sounds all well for the no coders and end users, but what about the traditional developers? Do they have anything to fear?
Yeah. So other than obviously joining the development of a no-code platform, which in itself is technically a very interesting thing to do, I would say actually like your work is going to become a lot more interesting, right? I mean, one of my first businesses, we built software for point of sale systems, and a customer would ask, like, hey, we need this one column added, and you go and you build a column with, like, I don't know, a description or a price. I mean, it doesn't even matter. I've forgotten this is how boring it was to add a column for a customer. It's very important for them, right? Because they need to have that information on screen or at that moment when they're on this screen or on that screen. It's super important, but it's not something that you really want to spend your time on as a developer. If you are into like the deep software engineering, what you actually like is things like data structures, right? How can I make this thing perform better? How can I make this process more scalable? How can I do these things? And I think that with the advent of no code actually brings with it that developers will be able to spend more time solving the deeper tech issues rather than the more let's say the more shallow problems from a coding perspective. The more shallow problems of adding a column here or adding fields on certain screens or little buttons that they could actually nowadays just have done by those departments themselves. That makes everyone happier because you also see a lot of miscommunication between these departments, right? How many times have you had, as a developer or as a business partner, as a business development department, that you go like, hey, this was not exactly what I meant, or you did not express what you needed correctly to me, or it changed, or those things, and that's just the world we live in. So I think that actually for developers it's a blessing. It just requires the company to really set up that core system with APIs, like with microservices, to expose the core processes in a way that's safe for them. So I think developers should really work on that and push that agenda to management, which will actually help the company be able to adapt much quicker and actually to be way more productive versus trying to keep control over all the IT that's used in companies. So it's really exciting actually in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, in short, I believe that the number is stated in the report. I think around 60 to 70% of the budget and the time goes on maintenance work, and only 30 or so is available for innovation. So by using no code, it would definitely make a huge switch in those proportions, and the developers would finally be able to do what they were trained to do. I mean,
yeah, exactly. I also think that, and you have that the what Gardner calls the base layered model, right, in the report as well, and it's really about like how can you, as a company, so not as an IT department, but as a company, how can you make sure that you spend more time in like your layer of innovation instead of
exactly.
sort of on maintenance and registration systems. So I think that no code in that sense puts a lot of the innovation of the customer facing tools at the departments where they can immediately implement that, and it keeps a lot of the more technical challenges that also provide a lot of innovation but are not directly externally facing with the IT department where it actually belongs.
Yeah, I think this is a great conclusion to the whole story. Yeah. No code basically unlocks innovation. That's
Yeah, it does. It does for
that's
sure. Yeah.
sorry, we're running a bit over the time limit, so I'm gonna switch to the Q&A now, so we can answer the questions from the audience. So Paul asks, perhaps soon no-code development will be part of regular education curricula. What do you think about it? Sounds like the new generation needs to have it as a default skill. I think Niall will take care of
Yeah,
that
this is
one.
definitely Niles.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I think. I mean, first of all, I think it's something that's happening in small pockets. You know, I've seen articles here and there about people kind of picking up no-code skills. It's definitely not mainstream yet. I think where we are seeing more of it at the minute is in universities. So, you know, a lot of especially business schools. One of the big problems people in business schools have is they you know, typically are not technical because they're in business school, obviously, not technical school, and you know, they want to start a business. Again, they're in business school, but they can't find a technical co-founder, and so, you know, one of the things that universities are really keen on is obviously no code as a way to become your own technical co-founder and build it yourself. But you know, when I went to school, one of the things that we were taught in IT class was how to use Microsoft Office, and I don't think I've ever met anyone ever anywhere who doesn't know how to use Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
At least, you know, even if it's just maybe they know how to use Word, but they're not a, you know, a spreadsheet expert. And I think, you know, I think the level of skill required to use Microsoft Office is the same level of skill that's soon going to be required to use no-code tools. And so, you know, my hope is that one day, you know, I don't know what tool it'll be, but I hope that at least one tool sort of emerges. And so the same way that everyone, you know, in an office environment or a work environment kind of needs to know how to use email, how to use Microsoft Word, you know, that basic skill. I'm hoping that there's a no-code tool where that becomes a basic skill as well. And I think if that starts to become something widely adopted, I think it will really, really quickly, you know, trickle down to the education world. And I think as well, you know, one of the things I often say about no-code is obviously you're, in many cases, and depending on the tool again, you are still programming. You know, you're still having to think about logic. You're still having to think what
Exactly,
happens
yeah.
when this button clicks, what decisions getting made. And ultimately, you know, every tool that people build, be it Triggre, be it Stack, or whatever it might be, ultimately those are just one person's or multiple people's interpretation of here is what we think is the best way to do programming and learn it visually. And so I think if you're trying to teach kids that, and if you're trying to teach them how computers work, you know, learning no-code tools for the sake of learning no-code tools is great, but learning no-code tools as a way to teach programming logic, you know, I think is also a really big use case there.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things that really help kids. Like you've got Lego Mindstorm, which is interesting, right? For youngers. There's programming initiatives like programming. I think it's called Haiti, is a programming language that sort of steps up in really small steps to sort of more complex things, which is interesting for people to learn a little bit. And it doesn't mean that people have to get into programming, but it's more the way of thinking of automation that is the skill that I think that people need. And actually here we have a college that actually has set up a curriculum on no code. It's a minor, and they use Triggre and some other tools that actually get taught as just showing exactly as Niall says, like this is what you can do with no code, and then like apply this to whichever business idea you have, and just know that these things are around. I think that's I think it definitely is going to make a big entrance in educational curriculums. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, we can move to the next question. Will allowing any employee the ability to modify internal software pose risk to data security?
Yes, it will. It's the same. I once wrote this blog article about the digitalization of the Rolodex. Basically, the first time around, I had what was it called? Something like Outlook 95 contact manager or something like that. And I would like type over these addresses from the business cards that I would get. And that would be a digital way to do that. But it was actually fairly annoying because they were on my computer. I couldn't really access them anywhere. And LinkedIn is how you should digitalize that, right? Now, the problem with LinkedIn is obviously you get marketed. I didn't used to get marketed by people on my Rolodex. I can tell you that. It's open. It's prone to leaks and security issues. But would I ever go back? Hell no, I would never go back, because now when Gordon changes his address and I want to send him a sweet card for, like, I don't know, Christmas, I just go onto LinkedIn and I see his contact details because Gordon updated them right after he moved, so that I don't have to go back to Gordon and ask, hey man, where did you move to? You moved. Oh shit. Well, those flowers are in the wrong direction. Oops. So there's always upsides and downsides to these things. So yes, there will be a risk, and this is why I propose that that core of the business really is still maintained by an IT department, which really has this data security as their main concern. And there are definitely ways to work around that, but yes, it will increase risks of data security. I mean, a leak is easy to make. It's much easier to leak email addresses by putting addresses in a to field in the email. That's even a data breach, right? If you accidentally do that instead of the BCC field. So yes, it will increase, but I think honestly that with the right management on it and with the added benefits that you get, it is worth the risks. But yeah, it definitely will increase a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. How would you then go about introducing no code, like step by step, to the entire business? That was I wanted to ask you that on the one of the previous slides. I think that's also interesting.
One is you have to be smart about it, right? So we worked with a bank a couple of years ago, and for example, they made sure that any data that went into the system that they developed with Triggre is actually anonymized. So that is one way to prevent, let's say, GDPR type data risks. In terms of security of the platform, I think that all the platforms have that really well covered. I don't think that it's a bigger risk to sort of outsource those things than insource them. But in terms of using data, start with like simpler processes first, right? Don't go and say like, hey, I am going to automate with no code something that is super sensitive. Go with a simpler process first. There are many that you can automate that will already give you a huge amount of productivity increases of let's say even competitive advantages that don't require you to like take the most sacred of data that you have and risk.
Yeah, exactly.
So get used to how it works a little bit, get to the ins and outs, and then go on to the harder ones. Yeah.
I'm guessing, Niall, that's maybe a question for you. Would you then how to best introduce no code to the employees? Would you hold like 2-3 week courses for some of the automation tools to slowly get them into it, or how would you introduce that to the organization?
Yeah, so I've kind of been on the flip side of this, in that before I was running NoCode.tech full time, I was working in a bank in a sort of senior management role, and one of the initiatives I looked at was bringing no code in there, which will probably not surprise you. And yeah, one of the things we had to do, obviously, was train up employees. In terms of getting them to learn that was kind of the straightforward part. You do just sit them down with, a pretty good course. You sit them down with a tool that they can play with, and you let them kind of get at it. I think the more important part before that is getting people excited about what they can do, and getting people interested in it. When the bank I worked at had about 90,000 employees, and less than 5,000 of those were involved in IT, in terms of like developers, etc. And so the vast majority of people working there really had no idea how to influence, the tools that they were using all day, the processes they were using all day. Everyone else had kind of bugbears, but they didn't really realize that it could be within their capacity. If you don't like this process, now you can fix it. If you want to add a CRM between you and this team that you have to interface with, well, now you can do it. And so, the key part was kind of finding people who were interested in that, up front, who really kind of saw the possibilities. And I think who also had the insight and the ability to kind of look at processes and kind of go, oh, this isn't right, that could be better, versus some people are just very much like, well, this is the way it is. And you can change those people's kind of, view as well. And you can work with them, but they're not the best people to start with. And so, when we kind of found those people, we also then looked at who's already got some experience. Maybe they can do Excel macros, maybe they're a designer, and they're already used to kind of, building interfaces and that kind of thing. And then finally, we put those people through, courses and that sort of thing. I think the bit that's more difficult, it's one thing to teach the tool, but the bit that's more difficult to teach people, especially when you're thinking about, things like data security and performance, and this is where IT tend to get really worried, is, the three of us presenting here as people who are, relatively techie. We tend to know things like, for example, if a database, if you query a database, you ask a database a question and it takes 1 second, that is a very, 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 very long amount of time, and that's a problem. To a lot of people, you're like, oh, a second, that's brilliant. But actually, that was one of the problems that we kind of faced in the bank, is if someone did a query that took a second, that would just start destroying systems left, right, and centre, because the database would hang, it wouldn't respond, so on and so forth. And so trying to teach people nuance like that is what was really difficult. Trying to teach people, to name a variable properly and all that kind of thing. That was the difficulty. And I think a lot of it just came from experience. But, what we really did was just start to think about, how do we simplify all that stuff? How do we make it easier? So, when we had a review process, when you built your first app, you wanted to put it live, one of the things that we would do is go and review all your variables, and we'd tell you, look, we don't know what these 3 variables mean, so you need to go and put a proper name on it, and actually now you've got to document it, and all that kind of thing, all that sort of knowledge where in programming is the difference between being a coder and being a software engineer,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's definitely in line with what Jesse's thoughts were. So yeah, we can move on to the next question, I think. Okay, so Hanna Gavrilova asks, many SMB founders and managers are not aware of the power of no-code. Some of my marketing colleagues are pleasantly surprised when we discuss how easy it is to build your own software today. I feel like there's a need for more exposure to the non-tech. Okay, so basically the question is how to bring more exposure to the non-tech people.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we're thinking about a lot this year. I think over at nocode.tech, so the primary way that we reach people today is through Google search, and so we've got a lot of inbound interest, and that tends to be people searching, no code or no code app builders, etc. And that's great for people who've already heard about no code. But then there's a whole world out there of people who just haven't. And actually, we just sent out an email today talking about this, talking about how we're trying to cross the chasm from the early adopters, now over to the kind of early majority. And I think it's about two things. It's about going where these people are, right, and that's sort of the obvious bit. At the minute we're on Google, we're on Twitter. We want to be more on LinkedIn. We want to be more on Facebook, because if you go on Twitter, you can reach some really talented and amazing people there. But you can also, they're also already on Product Hunt, and they already see, a no-code hashtag and look into it. They're a different audience, and so we're trying to find ways to reach people. And I think, that's sort of step one. I think step two is making content that's more relevant to them. I think a lot of people running a small business or an even larger business, they probably don't care how too much about how to make an Airbnb clone in Bubble. They probably don't care very much about necessarily a mobile app builder. Maybe they do, but I think you kind of get in there first and foremost and build confidence in these tools by primarily just solving small problems first. It's a bit like, Jesse, what you were saying around about how do you adopt no code in a large company. You start with a small problem, and one of the issues you have is no code tools have been around for a very, very long time. Probably there's a lot of people who remember Adobe Dreamweaver back in the 90s or the early 2000s or something, and how bad that was as a tool. And so, especially in the small business space, I would say I think a lot of people have been burnt by tools that are not really living up to the promise or not as good as they thought they were going to be. And I think, for us as people trying to promote the no-code world, we have to go to these people, we have to show them relevant use cases, but I think we also have to build up their trust because, the real problem with no-code is you're kind of selling magic, and it's very easy for someone to come on here and go, hold on, all this stuff I read about Silicon Valley whiz kids and you've got to be, a total brain box to program. That's actually not true. And I can build an app right now for only $20. When you say it like that, it kind of sounds unimaginable. And I think that's the problem that we've got to kind of conquer,
Yeah, I fully agree, and I also think that there's definitely a difference if you are someone who wants to automate something or like use no code in the business that you work in, or whether you are a partner that is working for customers. I think that without giving away obviously how we market too much, but I think that there's a there's no one in, let's say, the real business world, so to say, that is nowadays going like, I have this problem in my logistic process. I wonder if there's a no-code tool that can use me to build something custom for this. That question just doesn't come up, just like Hannah says here. Yeah. And the way that partners can actually add a lot of value to sort of the adoption of this is you probably have some niche knowledge, right? You are probably good in some niche, manufacturing, professional services, logistics, you name it, banking. You might have some specific knowledge. Use that knowledge on top of the no-code platform. So learn 2-3 no-code platforms that together sort of really give you a wide array of possible use cases that you can do within your niche, and target your customers with your niche problems. The pains, the gains that are there to be gotten from your customers. And if you add no code to that, you just basically get like this power tool instead of just a simple hammer to solve the issue. So I think that adding your niche knowledge, your specific domain knowledge to your ability to use these no code tools is one of those things that will definitely make it more mainstream. And only after that has gone on for a number of years will people start to realize that, there's all these tools that you can use to build something with without ever, having to use technical knowledge or coding skills or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think that's a great conclusion to all this. But I see one more interesting question in the chat, and then we'll have to end this because it's because we've broken every time limit. But this one is interesting, from Giuseppe Craparotta. Hello, thanks for organizing this. How no-code will intersect with the need of creating and building for the metaverse? Are you aware of any no-code app allowing 3D visual creation that could be compatible with metaverse platforms such as Sandbox?
So I'm rapidly trying to open an ecosystem picture that I had somewhere, because there are some tools. I think no code has been pretty slow to reach the kind of 3D visual creation sort of world, and I think part of that is because you kind of have the gaming industry there that have their own really, really unique tooling like Unity and stuff like that. That's certainly not no code, but it's not pure code either. And so I definitely think there's a little bit of there's definitely a lag behind in reaching that kind of world. But I think it has to come. The metaverse kind of concept only really works if everyone can participate in it and everyone can create in it. And I think there's always going to be, all the early adoption again is going to come from programming. It's a bit like real world digitization. In the 90s, there was only, the nerdiest of nerdy programmers who did it. And I remember when I kind of started getting into programming as a massive nerd in the 2000s, that was still back when the internet felt like there were no real non-nerdy people on it, and then it became more mainstream, and it became suddenly the internet became this thing that absolutely everyone uses. And then fast forward to now, especially the kind of kick over the pandemic that Jesse talked about. Now not only does everybody participate in the internet, but suddenly everyone wants to manipulate the internet, create things in it, do things with it in the same way that in the real world everybody can cook, or everyone can swing a hammer, or pick things up and put things down. Now we want people to be able to do that on the internet, and that's why no code is getting so big. And so I think that same trend, every trend related to technology gets faster and faster and faster, and it might have taken us 10 years for people to go from the internet being popular to everyone kind of being able to do no code type stuff and sort of manipulate it. And I mean manipulate in the positive sense of the word, by the way. I think with the metaverse, it'll happen even quicker. The metaverse will show up, and within a year or two, everybody will be able to create on it, and I don't know what you would even do, build a virtual house, design a virtual outfit, whatever it may be. But yeah, I think that's absolutely coming. In terms of the tools that are there for it today, they are a little bit kind of few and far between. There's tools like kind of Scapic, there's Blipper, but beyond that, I kind of struggle to think of many. And I think I would say at this point, and just because it's probably such a hard field, there's many that I would struggle to recommend. There's not a Webflow of 3D yet,
I think
Yeah,
that's a
I think
topic for a whole
the
other
main
discussion,
reason, the main reason they're not there is because if I just look at our strategic decisions on why you want to build something like Triggre or any no-code app for the metaverse, is you don't know yet what it's going to be like. So you don't know what you're building a designer for. And you have to understand that building a no-code platform is basically like building a factory that builds factories. And in order to know how to design that, you're going to have to know which kind of factories you want to build, right? So that's a really tough one to solve. So I think that for now, actually having the flexibility, because any no-code tool will always take away flexibility. Like take a computer, right? If I could write exactly if I used machine code on the computer, I can do a lot more than I can do just using the web. It will just take me 100 years to make a GIF, but it's more versatile that way. It just takes longer. So the thing is that with things like where the metaverse is now, actually programming seems to me as the most flexible way to find out what it needs to be. There's a lot of good programmers that are finding ways how to do this, and like Niall says, like in the gaming world, you've got like gaming engines, and the reason that they always allow for you to program is because games specifically are extremely performance focused. I've done 3D programming in the past, and it's not easy. So any platform that takes away some of the intricacies of that is helpful. But at the same time, as we also discussed earlier on performance, especially with the metaverse, which is performance-wise has a lot of let's say problems and caveats that have to be solved by programmers right now, and still that sort of explorative field that it is. I would say that for now, no code would not be very easy to develop. Not saying that there are not things that make it easier to develop things in 3D, like inside Roblox, for example, you can make things very easily. Back in the day, you had, and it's still around, Second Life, arguably the first metaverse that is not a game. You can build things in there too. And you can use like 3D Studio Max type modelers or a Maya to design 3D animations and 3D houses and whatnot. So I think that will come, But the challenge for things like the metaverse and NFTs and everything that's sort of around the Web3 is actually some form of let's say standardization, not really standardization, but sort of a consensus of, this is a good ground to start building on top of. And right now we're just finding out what ground that is.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely too early to tell, but it's gonna be a big focus in the future for sure.
Yeah,
And
it's been
hopefully
on
one
my
of our future topics as well.
yeah.
I think that's a good one to wrap this. I'm just gonna move on to the next slide and let you, Jesse, to outro us so you can announce our joint webinar.
Yeah, that's actually, yeah. So first of all, everyone who listened into this, I hope it was very very helpful for you. I like the questions and the discussion with Niall and the insights from Gordon and Niall. So this is really cool. Make sure that you also read the Codemap State of the Market, because right now I think it's the most up-to-date thing that you can get to really quickly. It takes you like, I don't know, 15 minutes to read, and you get so much information from it. So make sure that you read that. So we decided also, because of that, sort of like we want to really provide some insights into things, that we have a joint webinar on how to build a business application without any code. So obviously we'll do that in Triggre, because that's kind of where I come in. And we'll do that in the week of the 7th of February. So you can follow us to stay up to date. And right before this meeting, I got the confirmation that we'll have a guest who will show their own multi-tenant application that they've built. So they'll actually show you something that other people would build as a SaaS, and explain how they built that. So I will do a little bit of a quick show on how that works, and then we'll get someone who's actually done it to present that, because I think that's more interesting than hearing me talk about the platform that I helped design. I don't know. So that's in that week. So make sure that you follow us on the social media channels to also get to that one if you enjoyed this one.
Okay, I think that's it for today, and thank you a bunch, guys, for participating, for doing this. It's been a lot of fun, and I think really helpful and interesting to our viewers as well.
Yes, thanks, Gordon, and thanks, Niall, for also joining in. I had a lot of fun. Thanks.
Me too. Thanks very much, guys. Much appreciated.
Bye, guys.